Greetings to all of you from India. With Namaskar. What Namaskar means to bring hearts together as you put your palms together. Now, after this wonderful, what we saw, Professor John Holloway's presentation, he's taking care of the music, so I don't have much left to say. I enjoyed it, except that I just flew in the morning from India, so I'm a little bit jet lagged. It's putting me kind of into such a sweet journey. I had to sometimes wake up and say, watch out, listen carefully. So, but it was wonderful because music has this quality. So today's subject given to me is music and spirituality, and I'm indeed honored to be here with Professor John Holloway because I've read a little bit about you before I came on the internet. I'm really honored. So I'm going to look at it from the point of view of Indian music and spirituality. How many minutes do we have? 10, okay. So the oldest literature available on spiritual matters in India, let's keep religion out of it for the time being. I know this is the house of religions, but the oldest spiritual literature, which at a very conservative estimate is about 4,000 years old, and the people might dispute, but are the Vedas. And all that is there in the Vedas is called the Shruti. Shruti, S-R-U-T-I, if you write it in English, Shruti. Now, Shruti, rhythm and music. And Shruti can't be written down, it can only be heard. So when the rishis received their wisdom, it came to them in the form of music, of song. In fact, one of the most important expressions, terms used in ancient Indian philosophy, one is vak, which means the word. It's sound, okay? Word is sound. And sound is called in Sanskrit shabda. So the word is the first sound. Now, in the New Testament, St. John's, correct me if I'm wrong, there's something which starts with, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. We have a very similar expression, statement in the Rig Veda, which says, I hope I can use a little bit of Sanskrit, because it's nice for me myself to hear. Which means that supreme reality, the beginning of everything, of the Praja, the Lord of Praja. Prajapati vai idam agrihi was there, not you can't say he or she, that was there in the beginning. Tasya vakti vityasit, and then the sound of the word, the sacred word, tasya vakti vityasit, that sound is no different from that supreme being. So in ancient India, we've done a lot of research into the link between spirituality and music. And because 4,000 years ago, the Vedas start with the Shruti, the sound. Now coming down to practical Indian music, there is a particular section of yoga, or the practice of, when you say yoga, don't just think about standing on your head. I mean, that's only one part of yoga. Or the popular brand of Hollywood yoga, which usually to develop a hourglass figure, but more than that. Because yoga is defined by the most important writer in the literature of yoga, Patanjali, who is the founder of Ashtanga Yoga. Now this Ashtanga Yoga has become a very popular title now. The day I went to the United States and I was in Wisconsin in a group that practiced Ashtanga Yoga. So I asked the young people, so who do you think is the founder of Ashtanga Yoga? And they said B.K.S. Iyengar. Of course, B.K.S. Iyengar popularized Ashtanga Yoga. But Ashtanga Yoga is the 8-limbed yoga which was founded by the great Rishi Patanjali, must be 3,000 years old. Now, up one section of this Ashtanga Yoga, or Patanjali's yoga, he refers to it as Kriya Yoga. He concerns sound and music, and that section is called the Nada Yoga, the yoga of Nada. Nada means music, sound, word, the different words you can use, because Sanskrit is an ancient language which, if you use one word like nada in Sanskrit, it requires several words in other languages. It's like you say a word in Hebrew and you can't exactly translate it into English. So, because it's an old classical language, it's an ancient language. So, in the same way, in Sanskrit, when you say nada, you can say sound, you can say music, you can say the word. There are many descriptions that have been given to nada. So what does it mean? You know, all our Indian music comes from the Veda, the third Veda. Now there are 4 Vedas: Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, Atharva. I wish I could sing, but then we have heard enough music. So beautiful music, that too. There's a phone singing now. So Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda and Atharvana Veda. These are the 4 Vedas. The third Veda is the Sama Veda. Now the Sama Veda is so important in this whole system, and all of India's music has come from the Sama Veda. And the Sama Veda cannot be chanted, it can only be sung. They say Sama Gayanti, which means they're singing the Sama Veda. And the importance here is the Sama Veda connects sound and music to the physio-psychological system in the human being, or you can say physio-psychic system in the human being, which are called the centers of energy, and because they move, they are called chakras. A chakra means that which moves. And even in ordinary Hindi, when we speak, we say, somebody say, how are you? Oh, terrible. I mean, it's kind of a chakkar, which means, you know, I'm caught up in the whirlpool. That's what it means. So a chakra, by definition, means a center from where the energy circulates, and in circular movement. Okay. Now, the whole of the Samaveda and some parts which have been adopted by Nada Yoga explain to you how you can practically use sound to awaken these centers, so that you don't experience only the 3-dimensional world that we see with our 5 senses. Now here we have this world with 5 senses. I'm sorry I'm talking instead of singing, but because like Professor John said, music also needs some kind of a language to understand, although it transcends language ultimately. A sound, pure sound, but it requires a language. You need to learn the music, the language of music, for instance, so that you can keep something in front of you, know what to do. So there is a system. However, the ultimate idea is to go beyond the system. But without learning the actual mechanics, you cannot innovate. What will you innovate if you know nothing? So first the system has to be learned. So this particular teaching is about how you can use sound to awaken these centers, so that your reach is beyond the ordinary world of the senses. Now you know this world we are in. We have eyes, we have ears, We have the sense of smell, we have taste, and we have touch. I mean, these are about 5 senses that we have, instruments of perception. Now the Vedas, the ancient teachings say there is something much more than this world, this 3-dimensional world that we see through these 5 instruments of perception. And music is one which is the border between the concrete world that you see and that which you cannot see, that which is beyond, is the link. So before coming to this practical aspect, I want to go look at it in a different angle. While of course it is necessary to have a language to study and understand music, the ultimate idea when you listen to music is purely beyond anything that you can define. And that which is undefinable in the Vedas is called the Supreme Brahman. Now, I always ask this question, can we think without a language? Just think carefully. Go into this and see, can you think without a language? Whatever you think, it's usually in a language that you know. When you're in childhood, you are brought up in a particular language, speaking that language, you think in that language. You can change it afterwards, but generally you go back to the basics. You can't. While, suppose we're not talking about vocal music, we're talking about instrumental, let's say. We have this ancient story of Krishna playing the flute in the groves of Vrindavan. The girls around, I mean, he was quite a prankster. So the girls of Vrindavan used to be completely forgetful of everything when they heard the sound of that flute. You know how? So now, suppose you and I, who speak different languages, are sitting under a tree in Vrindavan and listening to the music of the flute. You don't need a language to appreciate, to understand, to enjoy. Of course, technically you need, because the flute player is trained. But when he plays, when the music comes wafting into the air, and when you're sitting down and listening to this beautiful music, if your hair is not yet standing on end when you listen to it, then there's something beautiful going on which is not part of a language. Cutting across language barriers, we can enjoy it. I don't know the Western musical language, the different things used, but when I sat here, I was enjoying the music, because here there is no nationality, there is no language, there is no division, artificial division created by human beings. This music, Pythagoras called it the music of the spheres. Now, coming down to the practical side, the Nada Yoga, or the science of music, practice of using music, does 2 things. One is that it identifies particular sounds and particular instruments, and also vocal, which can affect the centers of energy, which are 7 in number, roughly, I mean the main centers in the human system, and awaken them so that other instruments of perception, other than the 5 senses, can be activated, and then the human being becomes a multi-dimensional being. He is not confined to the 3-dimensional world, length, breadth and height or depth. This is the whole process of music in Indian spiritual development. So therefore you will find that music is considered one of the sacred arts in India. All people who are supposed to be cultured and so on, they study music. And the music, the classical music of India has 7 sounds. I don't know about the Western music. We have 7 sounds. I'm looking at the practical aspect of it, and it's symbolized by some words, not even words, syllables: sa, ri, ga, ma, pa, da, and then ni. Now, if I say this, I mean, it's not music, but if you sing it, like the lowest is sa. Sa, not so good. Sa, re, ga, ma, pa, da, ni, sa, sa, ni, da, pa, ma, ga, ri, sa. You see this? Sa, re, ga, ma, pa, da, ni, sa, sa, ni, da, pa, ma, ga, ri, sa. So in these 7 sounds, in these octaves, the whole of the music is set. But when it comes together, it breaks through all the octaves and it's free. It reaches almost to the sound of the infinite. I am not a good singer, but you know, even when you say za re ga ma pa da ni sa za ni da pa ma ga ri sa. Now, each of these centers, which I explained are the chakras, starting from the bottom at the end of the spine, called the Muladhara, till the highest center, which is on the top, the crown of the head, which is called the Sahasrara, the 1,000-petaled lotus. They are also called Padmas because they are symbolized by a lotus which blossoms. When the lotus is closed, it's like this, and then it opens. So, in these 7 centers, each of the sounds are applied to each of the centers, so that when you manipulate the different sounds in different frequencies and in different repetitive models, then the centers become active. If somebody, a professional singer, is singing classical Indian music and goes off somewhere wrong, a professional who knows will say, oh, he's gone off to Shruti. Shruti illa? No, really. Sorry. So, again the language problem. So, this is the whole system of Indian music and spirituality. And, of course, the sound that is considered to be the most spiritual is the sound of Om. Now, please don't think of Om as a denominational religious sound. Consider it as a pure sound. Forget about the language. Consider it as a pure sound that can be heard or chanted by anybody beyond all definitions. In fact, the last part of Om, which is the sound of Ma, sound, is one of the most important, potent techniques that can be used in meditation and in spiritual practice. I'll explain to you. If you go to a hospital, for instance, where there are very sick patients and they're kind of convalescing, most frequent sound that you hear is You know why? Because it soothes the system. The sound soothes the system. And Om, therefore, the last part of Om, which is, suppose I say Om, which it's sound of it's called the sound of the bumblebee. Is a very potent sound to awaken your inner centers. So we do a practice called the Brahmari, where the ears are closed and one makes the sound of, I can't teach Kriya Yoga here, but this is the sound which when practiced arouses and awakens the centers of perception which are other than the 5 senses. So these are some of the aspects that connect music to spirituality. The other general thing we need to know is, I can talk now, it's prose. What if I chant, say some poetry, it becomes more interesting. What if it's put into song form, it becomes more interesting. Even if the subject is not interesting, you would listen to it, because sound has rhythms. See, what happens is, the rhythm of sound or music can adjust the rhythm and sound of your mind. You know how your mind is? All the time it's moving in waves. And the definition of yoga is how to make these waves still and make it tranquil. Not that there are no waves, but they are tranquil. And one of the ways of bringing tranquility to the mind waves is by tuning it in to the rhythm of music. Instrumental, vocal, it matters who is doing it, because you need a lot of expertise to bring it out and manifest it, like we heard today. Of course, we very much would have wished to hear the violin, but in this, like Professor John said, I have something to say. Like meditation. He said, you play for some time and then you don't want to play, but you want the music. It's similar. In meditation, when you go deep into meditation, a time comes when you really don't want to meditate. You don't want to, because you see that your mind is going into a kind of beautiful quietness, and some people with that stop meditation and say, oh, now I have found who I am, so I am not meditating. So it's just that you need to practice. As he said, you don't want to go into the actual stringing or the bow that plays across the strings. You need to keep practicing, because it is practice that makes perfect. In fact, Patanjali, the greatest exponent of yoga, the most important exponent, in Yoga Sutras of Patanjali says, Nairantarya Abhyasana, which means constant and regular practice, there is no way out. Don't think that because we have meditated we have practiced pranayam, breathing, we have listened to the sound and so on, we are finished with it. No. It requires constant practice. At a higher stage, of course, you don't need it. But in the beginning, you need it. Do you know why I meditate? If I stop meditating, all our friends would say, we have also reached. You don't need to meditate. It requires such constant practice. After so many years of practice, now he says, I don't want to play. Also because at a certain age, your fingers may not obey what you wanted them to do. That's maybe part of it. But beyond that, when you're in the pure strata of music, you want more to listen, conduct. You don't want to actually practice, but not for the beginner. So when you say, oh, I practice Kriya for 2 months and then now I'm okay, I don't need it. No, sorry, it will come back to the same state of tumultuous existence from which you can't come out. So practice is very essential. And finally, I would like to say that Western, Indian, doesn't matter what music, Gypsy, do listen to music, because it's the music is the soul, and music is the soul of life. With no music, we would be completely finished. It's as essential or more essential than sleep. You know why we enjoy sleeping? Because in sleep, we don't know who we are for some time. We are lost, which is why we are rejuvenated. The moment I know who I am, I begin, I am so and so, he is so and so. I went into a marriage party, nobody noticed me. The ego problems. But when you're asleep, who cares? You may be the president, or you could be the man who carries luggage in the railway station. Everybody sleeps. We all sleep, right? So in sleep, we forget all identity, we're finished. Therefore, we are rejuvenated. Now, here is something which, without being unconscious, you can still rejuvenate yourself. Music. In music, you're not really sleeping, but everything else is in suspension for some time. There is only the rhythm of the instrument or the singer playing in your mind, and if you can carry on with it and let your mind go with it, it can reach to the pinnacle of spiritual experience, which is why music is considered a very sacred thing in the ancient teachings in India also. Also, I'm saying, because there are other, I have walked into some of these beautiful cathedrals in Europe. Nobody goes nowadays. Some of them have been turned to malls. smells or whatever you call it. And then you hear those pipe music of the organs going on. It's so beautiful. You don't have to know anything, you just have to listen to it. So, and what's happened is that when you stop listening to this, then you end up being violent, terrible human beings. So I think music is a very important part of spirituality. Please, even if you have nothing to do, you don't have to listen to Krishna's flute, but you can hear the flute somewhere or any other music and enjoy it to your heart's content. Don't even think why I'm doing it. Is it to increase my chakras? Forget about your chakras. Listen to the music. Give complete attention to it and you'll see what happens. You're cured. You're healed. Music is healing. It's so important that in the Bhagavad Gita, I'm concluding, in the Bhagavad Gita, you know that there is a great scripture, not even a scripture, ancient sacred literature called the Bhagavad Gita. Now, if I translate this, Bhagavad means Lord and Gita means song. It's called the song of the Lord. It's a Gitam. And why is it called a Gitam? Because in the song you transcend the ordinary definitions of prose and language and it takes your mind to the higher levels of spiritual existence. So this is the connection. And in the Bhagavad Gita, suddenly Krishna starts, Krishna is the hero who's talking and Arjuna is the poor guy who's listening. And although it's called a dialogue, it's interesting to know that Krishna does most of the talking and Arjuna does most of the listening. But anyway, he's a good listener, so listening is very important. If you can't listen, you cannot learn. If you can't learn, you cannot teach. The other day in India, somebody went to a guru, a spirit. Now in India there are thousands of gurus now, so not to worry. So actually there are more gurus than disciples, unfortunately. Anyway, somebody went to a guru and he said, sir, I want to become your disciple, so what am I supposed to do? He said, okay, you have to come, get up in the morning, wake up at 4 o'clock. He said, 4 o'clock? Yeah. And then go to the Ganga, the river, and have a dip. He said, but sir, it's so cold. He said, yeah, so that's what you have to do, go and have a dip, okay. And then bring some water and clean up the kutir. Kutir is the hut where the guru is. Clean it up. And then come back and do some yoga asanas. And this guy is waiting to see where the breakfast comes in, but no sign of breakfast. Okay. So, okay, now you do your yoga. And then we have classes, the Upanishads and Yoga Shastras. So that goes on till 12 o'clock. So then after that you do a little bit of cooking. So this guy said, sir, please stop. Now what does it require to become a guru? Because this seems very tough. He said, you have to sit in a nice raised platform, put your hand up, and he said, please make me a guru. This is the situation. There is no teacher who has not been a student. So it's very important that one is a student first, and for that one needs to be free of the prejudice that I know. The main problem in anything, including the great thing called music, is that we start by saying, oh, I know everything. So, if you know everything, you cannot learn anything. So the starting should be chapter 1, page 1 is, I don't know. Sorry. I wanted to stress it and it made a sound. And I don't know. Because when you say I don't know, then that is the start of the journey. If there is no space in the brain, how can I learn anything? So I'm supposed to be winding up now, but I'm going to tell you a small little story before I do this, okay? I hope it's okay. Fine. Professor? So, apparently, a professor, very learned professor, went to a Zen master and said, sir, please teach me Zen. Teach me Satori. Satori is like, in yoga it's called Samadhi, Moksha, Kaivalya, Satori, the Japanese word. He said, okay, sit down, have a cup of tea. So he said to himself, I'm asking him a very serious question and this guy says, have a cup of tea. Well, to a Zen master you can't argue, He might get up and land a kick on you. So they're very eccentric. So he kept quiet. So the master went inside and made some tea in a kettle and brought it, put a cup on the table and poured the tea in. Sleepy. Poured the tea in. And then as he poured, the tea went into the cup, and then the cup became full, and he continued to pour, and the tea was coming out and flowing down the tablecloth. He waited for a minute, no sign of this guy stopping. So then he said, sir, stop a minute. The cup is overflowing. So the master said to the professor, your cup is overflowing, how can I give you Zen? So you pour in, it will come out. Understand? So, like in everything else, also in music, which I consider to be the link between the physical and the supramental, one should start with space, with an open mind, saying, let me learn. And then it's up to you. So I rest my case. Thank you very much.